let's start with some scene-setting questions. And I want to start with you, Chris, because we all know what Ripple is, but tell us about your avenue into sort of the environmental side of crypto and Bitcoin.
Yeah, well, again, thanks for having us. I actually spend most of my time now in climate change projects. That's my main job these days. So we just can't ignore what's going on in our own industry in crypto, and in particular with Bitcoin mining. It's a problem. The climate we're in crisis, and we've got to address it. And again, we hope we can get it to neutral, which is where most of the industry is today, carbon neutral, but maybe even get it to massively carbon negative. I think there's an opportunity that only Bitcoin has, and that's kind of exciting, but that will take a long time to get there, but that's the hope.
And Brittany, when I go on Griffin's website, I see ESG-driven mining. And to a pessimist, that might sound like an oxymoron, but I'm hoping you can just walk us through it. What is sort of the driving force behind Griffin?
Absolutely. When we started Griffin in late 2020, we specifically were seeking to create the first ESG-fossil carbon negative miner. So our thought was that most people in the industry are still plugging into mixed grids or using fossil fuels, even if it's not the majority of their energy source. So what we wanted to do is focus on using 100% renewable sources and also nuclear energy to create Bitcoin. And then on top of that, investing into carbon sequestration, carbon removal, reforestation projects, instead of just traditional offset, so that we are making sure we're a positive impact for the industry and for the environment as well.
And so when I was asked to do this panel, I was excited because on paper, Brittany and Chris, they're on two different sides of sort of the ideological spectrum here. So I want to ruffle some feathers. So Chris, I mean, in your ideal world, would you put Brittany out of business?
Well, no, absolutely not. First of all, Brittany's a hero, right? I mean, she's doing the right thing. The problem is the code that is embedded in proof of work in Bitcoin doesn't incent the kind of behavior that Brittany is leading here. So it's too easy for other people to say, hey, look, it's just cheaper to find waste coal plants in Pennsylvania, which is happening, which is shocking. Or when fossil fuel prices, when that demand finally eases and the prices dip below renewables, look, the miners will go there. So the problem is in the code. We can't rely on the goodness of folks like Brittany, who are true leaders. But unfortunately, the code is what sets the incentive. We've got to change the incentive.
So what does changing the code look like? What actually in practice would that look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be easy. It's going to take years. But whether that's a soft fork with the community going along with this necessary change, knowing there's a crisis here, or it's a hard fork that is driven by kind of a younger generation of people that are going to be more dialed into the problem. But what we've got to do, and so this is the thing I think that's very different from Ethereum. Obviously, it's switching the proof of stake. I actually believe it would be a lost opportunity if Bitcoin changed to proof of stake, because it does have what Brittany represents, this incredibly entrepreneurial, powerful mining industry, which is not the problem, right? The problem is they're being incented to do the wrong thing, which is burn as much energy as possible. What if you could incent them with a change in the code that says, hey, work in proof of work is not burning energy for all these guesses, but rather maybe creating renewable energy you're pushing into the grid. And based on how many joules of renewable energy you make, you get a higher chance of getting that reward or proposing the new ledger. Or maybe it was based on direct air capture. The more molecules of CO2 you captured, the more odds you're going to get that reward or be able to propose the new state of the ledger. That would now completely flip the script.
So we're going to get to proof of stake, but Brittany, I want to get your thoughts on that. When it comes to changing the code, whether that's possible and whether it should be possible, because a maximalist would tell you that probably shouldn't alter the code at all. Where do you fall on that?
So for me, as someone that traditionally comes from the data protection and privacy standpoint, I really think that the importance of proof of work is obvious. It's basically impossible to hack or manipulate a system where billions of dollars of ASIC computers are decentralized around the world. So therefore, the importance of proof of work is there, and it's obvious, and it's one of the most important technologies that we have today. Now, changing the code is something that happens every now and then. There was an upgrade to the network made last year. It takes the majority of Bitcoin miners around the world signaling that they do want to do that upgrade. Last year was called Taproot. So if there was a proposal out there to upgrade the network and change the code, it would take convincing most miners around the world to decide to go for that. So as Chris said, it's not simple and it's not easy. Now, for me, I prefer other types of incentive changes. I do a lot of legislative and regulatory work in the United States. I've been working in the state of Wyoming for the past 4.5 years, helping write and pass 23 different laws on digital assets. And we're starting to see now other states around the US that are passing crypto laws, and we're seeing mining incentives or mining disincentives that are being passed. For instance, in the state of Kentucky, we now have mining incentives, but it has nothing to do with renewable mining, just mining in general. And so I think that is going to drive a lot of fossil fuel burning companies that are mining Bitcoin to Kentucky, whereas you see the opposite in the state of New York. They have completely banned any non-100% renewable Bitcoin mining. Now, I have large operations in the state of New York, and they are not affected by that because we're using 100% hydroelectric energy. A lot of people ask me if I was involved with that law because it basically takes the competition out of the state. I was absolutely not involved with it. I don't really believe in those kind of draconian legislative initiatives because I don't think that Bitcoin mining is really a competition. But what it basically says is Bitcoin mining is now the only industry where you're banned unless you're 100% renewable. I would love to see that for big tech, for construction and infrastructure, for other industries, if New York really cares about incentivizing renewables, because for sure Bitcoin mining is not the biggest industry in the state of New York. Right. So I really think we should find a happy medium and find a way for there to be incentives, whether that be tax incentives or something else, to make sure that miners have a reason to choose renewable, if right now renewable is not cheaper than using a mixed grid or straight fossil fuels.
And we're going to get to renewables, but I want to harp on the code and proof of stake for a little bit longer because we flashed that Twitter poll a few minutes ago. I would love to bring it back up. We harnessed the power of our Twitter audience, asked them the question, would Bitcoin ever change from proof of work to proof of stake? Everyone said no, pretty much. I know what you guys are going to say, but I still want to ask you the question of why isn't there ever going to be a world, or why, in your view, won't there ever be a world where Bitcoin does go to proof of stake? Because if you think about sort of the sustainability of Bitcoin mining, this is probably overly simplistic, but it seems like proof of stake would be a simple solution. Chris, would love to hear your thoughts first.
Well, there's problems with proof of stake, certainly. So it's trade-offs, right? But I think, again, Bitcoin moving to proof of stake, it'd be a lost opportunity because it's the only one now, and especially with Ethereum changing, that will have this incredible industry. You have to give it to the mining industry. It moved practically the entire business from China to the US in a matter of months. It raised billions of dollars, incredibly entrepreneurial people. So that's an asset. And if you move to proof of stake, it all goes away. So why wouldn't the miners correctly oppose that? They should. A better solution would be moving to something like proof of useful work. And, there's a lot of teams that are working on just that thing. The issue here, the problem to solve is in Bitcoin proof of work today, you don't have to prove the work. The result proves you did the work, that you guessed the correct number. What you need to do when you're talking about work based on atoms or joules of renewable energy, you have to be able to measure that work as it was done. So how do you do that in a secure, censorship-resistant way? That is the challenge. But there are teams working on that. And I'd say to the Bitcoin community, look, if you can get a system that is equally secure, equally censorship resistant, but it's based on this powerful notion of miners now solving climate. I mean, you'd have to admit, wouldn't that be the greatest demand generator for the Bitcoin, asset? Everybody would want to own it. And the more the price went up, the more you're solving climate. And that's the reverse of what you have today. Bitcoin community should see the biggest risk to Bitcoin is climate is getting worse. We see the news every day, and Bitcoin is contributing to that. And this newer generation this future generation that's not even born yet, how are they not going to reject that? And Bitcoin will be isolated, especially as Ethereum changes. So we need to be working on that and encouraging that new, I don't know, kind of spirit of innovation. Frankly, I just don't get how the Bitcoin computer, the people that create, this, we're going to create the future, have turned into these extreme reactionaries that don't want to change anything. Come on, that is not what, Silicon Valley, the technology community was built on. It was built on a can-do spirit. Let's get working.
And to Chris's point on security, Brittany, I know that you have thoughts on that particular topic.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in proof of stake, it's possible to spoof that you have stake, and therefore it makes the network more vulnerable. I don't believe that getting rid of proof of work is going to solve anything, which is why I think it's so important that we consider different proposals on the best way forward. And what Chris said is incredibly important, which is the mining community needs to start finding ways to prove that we are using renewables or nuclear, so green energy. In order to prove that, it's actually very technically complex. Over the past year, I've been working with a group called Energy Web. I think a lot of people have heard of them now. They were the founders of the Crypto Climate Accord, which allowed the entire crypto industry, not just Bitcoin mining, to sign on to certain decarbonization promises, both by 2030 and by 2040. And they have really organized a diplomatic group for us to engage in international climate change diplomacy, and that's been incredible. But on the technical level, we've been working with both Energy Web, Zero Labs, Protocol Labs on different technical ways to prove that where your mining machines are plugged in, that it's using a particular energy mix and an energy source. And to be able to verify that, and therefore be able to prove that you are creating green digital assets. Now, there's a huge amount of steps to that. We don't have enough time today for me to go through everything that takes.
We've got 12 minutes.
But in the end, what it actually means is that you're able to trace the energy source through to the mining, through to the creation of the green digital asset or the green Bitcoins. And therefore, that opens up those Bitcoins to ESG-focused funds. It means organizations that are only interested in purchasing Bitcoins that have been created through green energy, that they can do that. And it also allows the industry to become more responsible, because now we've created an incentive structure where some of the biggest asset managers in the world that have a mandate to only be investing in ESG-friendly assets, that they can now include the Bitcoins created by certain companies or by certain mining pools. And that will really change everything. So really, the development of these technologies has been our focus over the past year.
And Brittany, let's go back to renewables and sort of the power sources that you've been talking about, because I'd love to get specific and sort of name names here. I mean, what other uses of power are you looking into?
So right now, we're mainly using hydroelectric and nuclear just because of its reliability. Now we're also looking into large-scale opportunities in solar and wind. But when you get to solar and wind, if you're going to solve for the latency, you're either going to end up using batteries, which normally end up being lithium, or you're going to have a type of green hydrogen or even a fossil fuel solution that is going to make up for when the sun isn't shining, when the wind isn't blowing. And so I think it's really important for us to recognize that if you are a company that relies on energy running 24/7, that solar and wind still have to have some kind of supplement. And we all know that lithium isn't good for the environment either. So retiring lithium batteries is not really the best answer. Neither is supplementing with fossil fuels or into a mixed grid. But I think a lot of companies that are investing in large scale solar and wind opportunities do see that as a much greener option than where their machines might be currently. And so I'm not knocking it whatsoever, but I do think that nuclear and hydro are really two of the best options for the industry right now. And that's why we're using so much hydro and nuclear energy in our Bitcoin production.
So we've got less than 10 minutes left. I'm still trying to make you guys fight here. Chris, does renewable energy go far enough?
No, and so I agree with half of what Brittany just said.
Okay.
Right, is let's come up with a proof of useful work that can measure work as defined by how much renewable energy you created, right? But again, if you could do that, then why not just make the whole system based on you created renewables, you didn't use renewables, right? The other thing, by the way, I just don't agree with at all is you can't have a green Bitcoin and a dirty Bitcoin, right? They have to be fungible. Those are two different coins. So you can't have a market like that. That would be a hard fork. But let's get back to the renewable thing. The reason we got into this whole campaign in the first place is because of that outrageous greenwashing report that Jack Dorsey and others put out about a year and a half ago, saying literally, quote unquote, that Bitcoin mining is the key to a renewable future. Like nobody in climate believes that. It's just utter hogwash, but it led to, I think, a lot of bad behavior, right? Justifying that somehow was a good thing. Look, we need renewables for everything else, right? And that was true a year and a half ago. It's so starkly true today. We're not only in a climate crisis, we're in an energy crisis, right? You have China today saying, hey, we may have to start importing coal again because we're lacking energy. Bitcoin mining is not creating new renewables, it's getting in the way, right? And again, what's the purpose of these consensus mechanisms? It's to validate state in a secure, censorship-resistant way. That's the objective. And now make that as efficient as possible. This notion, again, that somehow the use of energy in Bitcoin is the feature, not a bug. It's just backwards. So we've got to fight that notion, and we've got to work on things that get to neutral. And again, I agree, proof of stake, I think, is the wrong approach for Bitcoin. But proof of useful work, as Brittany was just talking about, if you can validate how much renewable energy you created as a miner, but instead of using it for guesses, push it to the grid and then just give those miners the number of guesses equal to the number of joules of renewable energy they created. Again, if you can validate that work, that's the key here, then do it that way, because now suddenly you're massively carbon negative, and it'd be the only coin that was like that. Bitcoin is the only coin. I know people have read Ministry of the Future, right? They talk about this mythical, carbon coin. Only Bitcoin has the shot to do that, but only if the people that are in the industry get out of their extreme reactionary posture of no, and get back to no. Technology is about change, is about being proactive, and get busy. Like, I can't believe there's not, with billions of dollars at stake, trillions of dollars, why aren't there 10 projects being backed by the Bitcoin community to find a new proof of useful work? Why aren't they working on that right now? So they've got to get out of this posture. And part of the campaign is to inspire, look, if it's not the people in the industry, a new group of people around the world that are being impacted to get to work, come up with a better system, and make Bitcoin truly the game changer that it could be, but that it isn't today.
Brittany, definitely want to give you a chance to respond.
Of course. So for me, I really think that the way that I see the Bitcoin mining industry, and indeed plenty of other digital assets that are created out of the crypto industry, is that this is an incredible opportunity to fund the large-scale development of green energy resources. Even now, tons of the projects that I either work with or have been in communication with around the world, those renewable energy sites have only been able to develop and grow because they have been funded by Bitcoin mining or another type of crypto mining or even staking operations. So it's possible that if we actually were to start measuring and over the next many years really be able to drive money into renewable energy development and nuclear energy development, so that although Bitcoin mining is taking a certain amount of energy, it's actually funding exponentially more green energy than it is taking. And just as Chris said, pushing that back to the grid is so incredibly important. At so many of these renewable energy sites where both myself and other mining companies are working, the excess energy is being sold back to the grid. And the only reason why those sites are being scaled up is specifically because of the income from the mining companies. And so I think that is a way that a lot of people are not really looking at as an incredible opportunity, where Bitcoin miners can become the greatest financial partner with countries in reaching their climate goals, as opposed to becoming an obstacle or a hindrance. I'm not saying that is already a trend that is happening all around the world in terms of vast majority of situations. I'm saying if we decide to design it that way, if we design for it and we plan for it, then it's very possible for that to be what we see in the future.
And so,
again,
Sorry, go ahead, Chris, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say the key to what Brittany's saying, though, you need the code change, right? You need the code change to flip it from an incentive to use to an incentive to create. Because let's keep in mind, if you look at solar prices today, they're not going down anymore, right? They're going up, right? Polysilicon prices now $40 a kilogram. That's the highest they've been in 10 years. So again, there is no demand problem for renewable energy. It's a supply problem. Everybody's trying to build on renewables. Europe, I mean, look what's going on with Ukraine. They're in a mad dash to get energy from anywhere. Bitcoin mining as it's structured today is just getting in the way. But if you had a code change where it flipped the script, it could actually be a huge part of the solution, but you've got to change the code.
Well, to that point, we have less than 6 minutes left, and it'd be remiss if I didn't mention the moment that we're in for the crypto industry. I don't know if you guys have heard, but there's been a massive drawdown. And when it comes to the incentive for that code change, and I'll ask a version of this to you both, Chris, do you feel that that has just fallen off the priority list, that the issues that are facing crypto right now are so great that is this even on people's radar right now that we should change the code of Bitcoin to make it more sustainable?
Well, I would argue it's more so than ever. Most of the industry's been humbled, and that's a good thing, right? It's a normal tech cycle that you go through, but it's a moment to reflect on what's working and what's not working. And you'd have to say that Bitcoin mining in a world that has an energy crisis and a climate crisis, it's not contributing to the solution. It's part of the problem. So if you're reevaluating kind of where you are, how do we make this technology truly valuable to the world? Change the code and make it so. It's so in our grasp. But the problem, you're right, it's come down a little bit, maybe from 140 trillion watt hours. I think today you're at about 80 terawatt hours. So that's better. But the history of Bitcoin is these price changes, they'll start going up. It's going up today. It's been going up nicely all week. It will recover, and you're back to the same problem. So now's the time. Crashes are the time to be rethinking things and to be relaunching new models. That's the history of technology. That's what we should be doing.
And Brittany, let's bring that question specifically to the miners, because obviously the mining industry has been under a lot of pain. And when you think about, the cost that it would take for some of these miners to switch to more renewable sources of energy, I mean, do you feel that momentum has been lost at this moment? Same question. I mean, has it just fallen off the priority list?
It might have for some other companies that are struggling to stay afloat. I'm lucky that at Griffin Digital Mining, we have an incredible team that made sure that we had a business model where we would always be in the green and that we were not wasting any time or money or energy. But there are so many people in the industry that are now struggling to make ends meet and wondering whether they're going to have to sell or shutter their doors. And so in that situation, when renewable energy sites are actually raising prices these days, a lot of miners in the industry that do not have an ESG mandate, I'm sure, are just going to be choosing the cheapest options possible, whether or not that's using fossil fuels or renewables. It's just going to depend where their operations are. And of course, Griffin's lucky that we decided to start our company on green energy. If you started your company using any type of energy, the cost that it actually takes to move all of your machines to another site is probably not going to be a cost that you're going to choose to incur at this time.
Well, to that point, I mean, do you think that some miners will be forced to make that choice to move? I mean, I think about what's going on in Texas with Bitcoin miners being forced to shut off their machines, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there will be plenty of mining companies that actually have to shut down, and they'll be selling their machines and their energy contracts to other companies. That's definitely going to happen. It happens in every low cycle and every bear market. So we're definitely going to see that. And of course, we're going to see less companies making those good, positively impactful decisions, because usually that requires extra investment on behalf of the company to make sure that they have an ESG budget, to make sure that no matter what those renewable energy prices are, if they have the capacity for those machines, that they're willing to pay it. So it is a dedication on behalf of the company and the investors in every company that if you are ESG focused and renewable focused, that it probably costs more to do that. So you have to have a business model that can actually sustain this type of waxing and waning of the industry.